Good morning. How are you doing today? Bob Folks here for the Gilly Glue. We're in the wild grasses wildflower patch. We just wanted to bring you a little update on how it's progressing. Lots of blooms and blossoms about to pop. We got some nice black-eyed Susan, some Queen's Anne's lace, and all kinds of things coming to the forefront here. Our serviceberry tree, it flowered out really nice this spring. I do have though to do a little bit of work here because there's a little bit too much cover over top of some things here, so we have to cut that back a little bit, prune up the tree, and make it better. Talk to you soon. Yeah, good morning. How you doing? Bob Folks here for the Gilly Glue. Just finishing up our little conversation here about native grasses and our wildflowers patch. It got a little bit breezy and a little bit hot out there, so I decided to come in and have another cup of coffee and just sit here on the porch and talk about a few things that are relative to the native grasses and native plants. The first thing would be the word native. We have to be very careful of native because the actual description or definition of native plant is something that was here before the European settlers came. As you know, a lot of the European settlers brought a lot of plants and medicinal items and things that they integrated into their lifestyle here in Canada when they immigrated here. And we're talking, you know, through the early 1800s and into the late 1800s and on. And a lot of those plants have become established and have a beneficial effect on our natural environment. But there's also a lot of things that don't have a beneficial effect. So that's a little bit of the definition and how we have to look at what's native and what isn't. And really it comes down to something that you grow, if you're a gardener or what have you, that is beneficial to our biodiversity or our native landscape. And by native landscape, we take in everything when we talk about that. So if we have a native plant, or tree for that matter, so let's take, to particular here in Eastern Ontario, let's talk about red maple, or sugar maples I should say, excuse me, not red maples, sugar maples that we have throughout, particularly out throughout Eastern Ontario, here in Lanark County and into Western Quebec. Lots and lots of maple sugar bushes. So they're a native tree. Well, a native plant or native tree will support more native insects, that will support more native animals and birds, that will support more of a biodiverse ecosystem. So when we look at new subdivisions as an example, we're not going to get into a whole host of conversation here because this could go on for hours and hours and hours. But our standard way that is driven by dollars and cents is that when a subdivision goes in, all the native plants are clear cut. The developer then has a responsibility to replant, but there is no regulation that stipulates what can be replanted. Therefore, there's a lot of grasses that are laid as sod around all these new homes that is often not native, that takes a lot of care and attention to manage, that it doesn't do well in our environment, in our climate. Then a lot of the landscape products that are used in these new developments then tend to be non-native as well. They're introduced species that don't support our local bug population, which increases the use of pesticides and herbicides, and it's an ongoing cycle. So you kind of see where I'm going with that part of the conversation, and that's the real function of why we sort of stress that. And you may think, well, you know, like, you're a bird shop, Bob. Why are you into so many about the plants and native grasses and things? Because that's basically our survival, right there. Is if we support the native bugs and animals, they'll support us. And there's where the imbalance is happening, is that we're nature and nature is us. So we have to live within that, within those guidelines as well. So if we live within nature and with nature, nature will look after us. And that's the main key, and that's the main point that I really wanted to make about that. So some of the other things, excuse me here. Inside of our wild grasses patch and things that we were in this morning, this is the ingredients list that may have been published on previous videos and things, but this is the ingredients list to know what's in that wild patch. And it's interesting in terms of percentages. So there's a foil bluegrass, there's 20% Indian grass, there's 22% switchgrass. So a lot of the higher percentages of these particular plants and flowers that are in there are all higher percentage of native plants. And it's very, very important to start to understand what is a native plant and what is an invasive plant. So even ornamental grasses and things are all invasive. A lot of the flowers and things that are planted are invasive. They don't support our native bugs that support our birds, that support all the way up the food chain. So we got to think about that. And then we get into ornamental trees. So it could be like a Norway maple as an example. That's not a native plant. It destroys our biodiversity. It takes 20 years to mature, and it takes a lot longer than that to eliminate the effects of it. So we have to start thinking of those things when we go forward with that. I was just listening, and I'll put the link down below. I was just listening to a very great YouTube by a fellow by the name of Steve Manning. He has a YouTube channel. This is an excellent video that he has here, and it's called Ornamental Invasive Plants of Ontario, Canada. Steve Manning is his name. Ornamental Invasive Plants of Ontario, Canada is the YouTube video that he has. It's an excellent video. We'll put the link down below, and I'd love to hear your comments and or thoughts about what it is you have in your gardens, and how you've developed your gardens, and what maybe there's an area that you feel that there's a concern that we maybe would work together to create a gardener or a master gardener. I am not. I just certainly have a genuine interest to develop land masses and ecosystems that are very diverse, that are native, that support our plants and our bugs and animals and insects and birds and what have you. And that's the unique part about our wild grasses patch. It's almost immediate when it comes up in the springs that there's leopard frogs in there, there's toads in there, and then very shortly after the deer are in there pretty well every night. You can see their little pathways through, and it's just a very small patch, so it's quite an interesting thing. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments on ornamental plants and gardening as opposed to native plants and gardening, and maybe just the fact that we have to be careful with that word native and what's invasive and what isn't, because some things that were introduced have been very positive to our life and our development here in Canada. So I hope you enjoyed that. Stay with us and follow us on all our social media platforms. Check us out at www.gillygaloobird.com, and please share and subscribe. Have a great day. Finish my coffee.